We are just as by way of overview. As I mentioned earlier, we'll touch on complaint and incident reporting, preliminary inquiries, which is the term that the statute gives to our process for investigating misconduct. When we suspend officers, and towards the end, we can talk about other things that we do, certification, some exceptions, and some of the future things that we have in the works. Okay, so the act that created POST was signed into law the very last day of 2020. It was all in the context of the events of 2020, George Floyd in May, etc., that gave way to a lot of police reform efforts that happened throughout the country. I came to learn later. In Massachusetts, we created, the legislature created the Post Commission, which is something that many other states have, and Massachusetts didn't. They have, or we had, and still have, a municipal police training committee, which handles a lot of the training throughout the state. But we've never had a post commission that certifies and decertifies officers since before the creation. So that came to be known as police reform. The law establishes mandatory 3-year certification for every law enforcement officer in the state. It's a process that we have to check every 3 years for every officer, collect certain information, etc. And perhaps more importantly, it establishes a process for disciplining and ultimately decertifying officers who engage in misconduct, and we don't want them to be officers anymore. When they do, if that happens, we enter them into the National Decertification Index, and in those cases, again, the case of decertification, it technically means that they cannot be a police officer around the country for all intents and purposes. So the law creates a process, it codifies how we go about doing it. That's a process that's mandatory for all police officers in the state, as well as there's a lot of emphasis on training and standardized training, which means a lot of collaboration between the Post Commission and the MPTC, the Municipal Police Training Committee. Just a couple of themes, Matt, the next slide, of the act. There's a great recognition that the effort of officers is greatly appreciated. Many of them, the vast majority of them, perform their jobs well. But of course, when some engage in misconduct or excessive force, there is a significant erosion to the trust in the community, and they don't want that. Nobody wants that. Everybody benefits from standardizing training, collection of data, public dissemination of data, which I will speak about in a minute, in terms of the misconduct and the disciplinary records of officers. And all of those steps are meant to be to create an environment where the police can do their job well and be trusted by the communities that they serve. Next slide. Some of the key points of the police reform law. It restricts certain use of force. It required that
no battery,
officers...
please charge.
I hope that wasn't us.
It's a speaker.
It's a speaker? Anyway, it requires that officers intervene where force is being improperly used. So there's now a duty of care, which is very important. It banned, it restricts facial recognition technology, something that it wasn't used too much in the past, but for the future. There's also some language relative to how officers, when they are school resource officers, interact in the schools. It's all subject to another law and a certain MOU process. There's also some banning on racial profiling, something that we collaborate with the Attorney General's office to try to detect. And there are a number of other things that are codified in the statute, like no-knock warrants, or having those officers prohibiting them from having sexual relations with those in custody. The law also codified, next slide, certain things that were not necessarily done in the past, but like chokeholds, for example, or taught in the past, but now it's really codified into law. Now, when it comes to certain things that we do relative to standards, we collaborate a lot with the Municipal Police Training Committee, just like I mentioned. They remain the agency that delivers the training and the standardized training, but the Post Commission gets to approve that and look at best practices throughout other jurisdictions and whatnot to deliver good training. As I mentioned, we do receive complaints through our Division of Standards. We investigate them, and we have the authority to adjudicate them. Given resources, of course, we have to be selective as to how many cases we're gonna go after. We issued regulations that codify the duty that the agencies have relative to all of the complaints that they receive and that we receive, and we can forward to those agencies to follow up on and investigate and discipline. And we remain almost like a superior court in terms of how we act on cases that maybe if we're not satisfied that the agency did something, according to established procedure. That happens rarely, but this is an important part of where we sit. We monitor actively how these agencies receive complaints, submit them to us, and follow up on those complaints. Next slide. I think that was it for overview of the Post Commission. So let me get to the complaints and incident reporting, which again is the meat of what we gather is the what you're interested in. So every law enforcement officer, every law enforcement agency is required to submit complaints or incident reports, any incidents that happens relative to misconduct, to the Post Commission within 2 business days. That is a very, very short time frame. It's something that is a challenge for everybody. We understand there's large agencies that get a lot of complaints. We developed a portal to enable us to get all this information. But the point is that it's in the statute that it's meant to be very quickly that something gets submitted to Post. The complaints can come from any source. By complaints, the statute uses the term complaint, but it's meant to be any kind of incident, internal incidents, allegations within the agency. It doesn't necessarily just mean somebody walking out to the front desk and saying, I have a complaint to make. I'm going to be choosy with the questions just for the sake of time, but if you have a specific question about that, sir?
Why do sheriffs go up with AR-15s and full armor to evict people, even an 80-year-old woman? She's not going to be doing that. All they're going to do is have their badge, and that's enforcement. But they come in with AR-15s, which is a killer rifle. It's made for one thing, to kill people.
Yeah.
Why do they show up at your doorstep to kick you out of your house?
That's a good question. We're going to get to that. Can we hold that question until the end?
Yep.
And then I'll come to you first. How about, let's get through the presentation so you get the kind of basic information, and then rest assured I'll get you a microphone. Okay? Are you speaking into, maybe this one needs to be charged, Alyssa.
Is this better?
Yeah, no, I don't
okay.
know what a law enforcement agency is. So
Yeah.
is that the same as police department, or maybe that would kind of address?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. The statute does define law enforcement agencies. They enumerate, every police department that you can think of, municipal police department, the state police is within our jurisdiction. The sheriffs, when they are conducting police duties and functions. So in the case of the sheriffs, there's a number of people that are certified by Post if they are out there conducting police duties and functions. It excludes correctional officers and other officers that maybe working with the sheriff's office, but not conducting police duties and functions. It includes constables if they're executing an arrest for any reason. And we have not yet certified constables for a number of reasons that I can get into later. But the statute codifies who falls within post, and it's most of what you think as a law enforcement officer.
Colleges too.
Yeah, sorry.
I was saying the colleges.
That's right. There's a number of colleges and hospitals that have a police department. They're special state police officers appointed by the colonel, or given a warrant by the colonel of the state police. Those fall within post as well, and need to do everything that we require all the agencies to do. Okay, so every law enforcement agency is supposed to submit any complaint that they receive that is credible. And there's a certain exception that I'll get to in a minute about certain complaints that they don't have to submit, but for the most part, they submit complaints to us. They're required to investigate them within 14 days and then finalize the investigation within 90 days. And all of that information comes to the Post Commission. There are reports that need to be submitted as well relative to excessive force, officer-involved shootings, anything having to do with that resulted in serious bodily injury or death. All of that is outlined in the regulations that we promulgated, the first set of regulations, all of which is also available in our website. Now, the statute, next slide, Matt, please. The statute calls out the complaints or incidents in the following 4 categories. Anything having to do with bias on any of the protected classes that we all know about. Anything having to do with the claims of excessive force, or anything having to do with incidents that results in serious bodily injury or death. All of those complaints, there's no exception. When they get them, they have to submit them to us. That's a very important focus of the statute. Anything having to do with prohibited conduct, all of which is outlined in those sections in the statute, which is what you would think is prohibited conduct. Timesheet fraud, accepting gratuities, for official acts, felonies, etc. All of that also needs to be reported to Post. Now, there's a category of complaints or incidents where that are generally referred to as unprofessionalism. This is the only category that the statute and we have made an exception for minor matters. There are a lot of the police departments and us. We also get complaints directly submitted to us. Our complaints relative to discourtesy and things like that. I don't condone anybody being not courteous, but we really don't need those type of complaints. There's plenty for us to look at, and we have made an exception for certain minor matters. Now, that exception is only in the submission to Post. Agencies are still required to investigate those and adjudicate them, and make those available to Post if we ever want to see them. And we have a process for that we're starting to craft right now for auditing certain things. Submission of complaints to Post is going to be one of our first things that we're going to audit. Okay, next slide, please. I mentioned some of these already, but within 14 days, they need to initiate an investigation. Within 90 days, they have to submit that investigation, the results of that investigation to Post. In certain cases, they need to have more time, and they can ask for an extension. But again, we monitor compliance with those timeframes actively, because it's something that we want to make sure that agencies are doing, and we are collecting all of that data. Typically, the results of those investigations can be unfounded, not sustained, or exonerated. When the discipline is imposed, we also need that discipline to be submitted to Post. we especially emphasize to heads of agencies that we pay particular attention when they have an active recommendation to post on certain actions. In some cases, we are required to open a preliminary inquiry when the head of the agency recommends that we decertify that officer. The point is that we have multiple touch points with many of these complaints, which has been a big challenge. We developed this portal. People log in, agencies logging into this portal, they submit information. We monitor the compliance with those deadlines that I mentioned, and we generate reports and report to the commission to make sure that all agencies are complying with these requirements.
Is all that there public document?
Yes, I can make this available. We have
No, are all the things listed on that slide public document? So the discipline enclosed, the disposition?
Yes, qualified yes. While something is being investigated, it's not public. If you go into our website, there's a disciplinary records database that will give you a big report. We want to make it friendlier and searchable, but we're working on it. You can download a big PDF and look up any officer that has.
I know that. That's what I'm asking. Are each of those bullet points there publicly available? If I request a discipline imposed on an officer whether it's been closed by the IA in Worcester, is that document publicly available?
Depends. Probably yes. Depend if the investigation has been finalized. Yeah.
So if something's closed, all that's available?
You'll be able. And if it's been sustained. We don't publish not sustained complaints. We will publish not sustained complaints in the aggregate, it's articulated in the regulations. Okay, next slide. So anybody can go into our website and enter a complaint. mapostcommission.gov. I think it's called also mass police complaints. You in our website you can quickly get to it. Go check it out. It's an important resource. I'll mention this now. In many instances, those when somebody submits a complaint to post, they have probably already submitted a complaint to the agency, and more often than not, the agency has already submitted that complaint to post because those 2 business days, assuming that it's an agency that is up to keeping up with the deadlines. When that happens, we reconcile it. We say, okay, this is the same thing. Let's see what investigation you're going to take, and we'll monitor it from there. If it's not, then we take action to refer to the agency and make sure that they know about it and also investigate it, because that's also in the regulations. All right, next slide. Check out our YouTube channel. Everything that we've done in terms of the post-commission meetings is there. There's a lot of resources. Again, I'll leave you all of these resources. Let me turn it over. Next slide. I'm going to have Matt walk through the preliminary inquiry process, which, as I mentioned, is something that his department does.
Thank you.
And I'll come back after this.
All right. I can just speak loud if everyone can hear me without the microphone. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right, good. I'm happier without it, frankly. Okay. So, again, for a brief introduction, my name is Matt Landry. I'm the director of the Division of Police Standards. And there's 2 main divisions in the commission. There's the Division of Certifications, which reviews and grants the applications when an officer wants to become certified. And then there is the Division of Standards, my division, which investigates allegations of misconduct and then takes appropriate action to recommend disciplinary proceedings to the commission when we feel that's warranted. So there's 2 sides of the staff, and I've been in my role about 2 years now. It's a wonderful agency with a great group of people that I think we're really working hard to do the right thing. There's 2 things. There's 2 reasons we do what we do: accountability and transparency. So accountability to make sure that there's a statewide standard and there's accountability for members of law enforcement that, unfortunately, when that happens, that people cross the line, that there is a measure of accountability for those individuals when that's necessary. And the second piece of that is transparency, so that the members of the public, in order to build that trust within the community, can see and understand what misconduct has happened when it's happened. We have the public database that Enrique mentioned. That is a work in progress. It always will be a work in progress. It is something that we're working very hard to expand and to grow and to turn into something that really will become a useful tool for members of the public that want to understand who the people that serve their communities and what they're doing, and to be able to establish that means of transparency there. So that's at a broad level what the Division of Standards is focused on. And I'm now going to talk to you about some details about what the investigative process and the discipline process actually looks like when it happens. So preliminary inquiry, that's our term for investigation. So when there is a complaint, that is deemed credible, or that is deemed, or that meets certain criteria that's established by our statute or regulations, the commission can vote and authorize the Division of Standards to open a preliminary inquiry. That is a confidential proceeding, which means that we don't talk about it outside of that investigation. At that initial point, the officer is entitled to some method of privacy, because there's not yet been an established basis to consider public discipline, but the investigation is confidential, at least at its initial stage. So, next slide. And so there's, again, as I said, our statute gives us certain criteria that we're required to open investigations on. And the most, and some of these are just gonna be pretty obvious. So if an officer commits a crime, if an officer commits a felony or a misdemeanor, that's an investigation for the commission. We obviously want to look at that, we need to look at that. No one really argues that's necessary. If there's a complaint that the officer was involved in, like an officer-involved injury or death, that is a required investigation for the commission. Prohibited conduct, that's it's a vaguer term, but there are other parts of our statute that talk about what prohibited conduct is. Section 10 of our statute lists a whole bunch of things. If there's a pattern of unprofessional conduct, if the officer files a false police report, if the officer engages in a hate crime, if the officer engages in excessive force, all these things are specified in our statute. So prohibited conduct is a known term for us, and any of those activities will cause us to open an investigation into that allegation. Additionally, another important part of our statute is that a police chief anywhere in the Commonwealth, or that officer's police chief, can say to the commission, can make a recommendation to us that we think that you should take disciplinary action against this officer. And so even if the allegation may not fall into one of these categories, we do depend on our police chiefs to tell us about problems. They are one source of helpful information about the people that work for them, and they are closer to it than we are. It's a big state. So the chief can tell us, and in the statute, if the chief of police recommends that the commission consider discipline against an officer, that will trigger an investigation by post. That is helpful when you have officers that resign in lieu of discipline to try to escape consequences at their place of employment, and then try to get hired someplace else without that record popping up. So this is proven to be a really helpful tool at not having that happen anymore. So next slide. There are confidential investigations, as I said. We request approval from the commission to open these investigations. We have monthly meetings, and after the public meeting is over, we do the executive sessions, which are private in nature, and then we ask the commission to authorize us to investigate certain officers based on what's come in that month, basically. We do give, obviously, the officer and their chief, and if they're in a union, the head of that union, we give them notice of the start of that investigation. And then in some cases, the commission can suspend that officer's certification immediately. So some allegations are so serious that we don't want that person to work while the investigation's happening. If an officer is arrested for a felony charge, that person is going to be suspended the same or next day. That just happens. That person is not going to be working as a police officer while they have a felony charge sort of pending and having to deal with that. The public safety warrants that. That's in the statute. That's how we do it. There's also a catch-all that if an officer, if the allegations represent a threat to the public safety for some reason, then the commission has the ability to vote to suspend that certification, again, while the investigation plays out. So our investigations can take some time, and sometimes if the nature of the charge is something that really affects the safety of the public, this person shouldn't be working, we can take their certification and basically put that on hold during the time that we are looking into it. That's not every case, but that option is available to us when the commission finds that it's warranted. And then at the end of the investigation, when the Division of Standards is finished with our work, we will go talk to witnesses, we will talk to the officer, we will collect documents, we'll review documents, and we will prepare our report to the commission. And at the end of that, we may recommend that the commission start disciplinary proceedings. That's where you get into the public part of the disciplinary process. And so when that happens, the commission again is presented with the report and they take a vote on whether to commence the public disciplinary process against that officer. And the commission can do any number of things to an officer's certification. They could do nothing. They could decide that the officer's already performed some retraining at their department. They could decide to order retraining. The commission could say that officer needs to be retrained or hasn't had enough training on whatever the issue was. The commission could impose another suspension on an officer's certification, or the commission can decertify a police officer, which permanently revokes their certification and makes them ineligible to work as an officer in the Commonwealth ever again. One of the consequences, I don't know if the NDI is in one of the slides here, but is it? Okay, all right, then I'll save it for that. There's a rule that we generally wait for the agency. If the agency has done an internal affairs investigation, we generally give them some time to finish that before we take final action, or a year has passed, whichever sooner. That doesn't usually factor into our practice, but by the time the whole process is worked out, it's basically at that point anyway. But that is a provision of our statute. So our investigations are confidential, as I've said, but the hearings on disciplinary proceedings are public, and those they're usually done via Zoom. We have a hearing room in Boston that's broadcast over Zoom, and members of the public, like any courtroom, are able to sort of virtually walk into that hearing and observe what's going on. Those are available, and we have on our website, there's an events page. You can go and you can see what's coming up next. So you can see what we're working on. The officer obviously has the right to introduce evidence, and the Division of Standards, we have 5 lawyers that work in our division. They essentially act as prosecutors on behalf of the commission, presenting the evidence to support discipline to the commission, and then on the other side is the officer presenting what they have in mitigation, and then the commission decides what they want to do with that. And that's the hearing process in a nutshell. Next slide. All right. So I'll cover, I'm gonna back up to just one thing with the National Decertification Index. So when we decertify an officer, we report that officer's information to a national database called the National Decertification Index. And that's a national database that every jurisdiction has access to. And many jurisdictions, not all, but many jurisdictions will check that database, the NDI, before they employ an officer. So, and there's a catalog of names of officers that post commissions or licensing authorities in other states have taken disciplinary action on an officer's certification in those states. And so we can check if an officer tries to get employed here and they've already been decertified in another state. We have the ability to check that, and we do check that, to make sure that that person hasn't already accrued discipline someplace else. And likewise, we broadcast the names of people that we decertify into that index as well, for the benefit of other jurisdictions too. So that's all new since police reform. That wasn't happening before. That's now a thing that the Commonwealth does. Like that in and of itself is a great addition that police reform has given us. So all right, now we'll go to suspensions. And when I talked about suspensions a minute ago, I was talking about like disciplinary suspensions, but there's other kind of suspensions too. We can administratively suspend the certification of an officer if they just don't keep up with their training requirements. not a disciplinary thing, but really it's just, it's a continued fitness to serve thing. If the officer has not completed their training, we can suspend their certification until they catch up with that, and then once they do, it gets reinstated. Obviously, there would be exceptions that we have for if their person's out on injury leave or disability, leave of absence, or military leave, or some kind of service interruption. For those reasons, we don't take their certification away for that, but they do have to complete the requirements within a short period of time once they do go back to active service. And then an officer may face administrative suspension if they don't submit required information to post. So all of the information that the executive director mentioned a minute ago about agencies have to submit complaint data, investigative reports. We ask a lot of agencies. We ask them to submit a lot of stuff to us detailing about officer misconduct. They don't always want to do that, but the hook there is that if they don't, the individual officer that is responsible for submitting those reports could have their certification suspended by post. That's a powerful motivator to provide that information to post. So, all right. Yeah, and then this is going to recover a little bit of ground here, but if an officer is arrested with a felony, that person is going to be suspended pretty much same or next day. And the commission only meets monthly, so normally we'd have to wait to get their vote every month, but they have wisely delegated the authority to suspend in these cases to the executive director, which makes that a staff level thing that we can just do as soon as we get the police report in hand. We can just take that action right away, and there's no there's no lag time there. Officers do have the due process right to get a hearing if they want to before one of the 9 commissioners. They can get that within I think it's 15 days of the date we suspend them. That's their opportunity to say, you suspended the wrong John Smith. I actually wasn't the one that was charged with a felony or something like that. They'd have that right to make that case to us and say, but they have that right to get a hearing. And then if the charges are dropped or they're reduced to something less, they have the right to come to the commission and ask the commission to lift that suspension, and the commission will hear that case. All right. So misdemeanor charges are handled a little differently. The commission has the discretion to suspend an officer, but doesn't always do that. And basically, the commission needs to determine that the crime that they're charged with affects their fitness to serve as a law enforcement officer. So so misdemeanors are treated a little differently, but that's a feature of the statute. Health, safety, and welfare is just it's a catch-all. It allows us to suspend an officer for a virtually untold number of reasons if we feel that it's a public safety issue. So. Right, okay, well, here's the NDI. All right, I got ahead of myself. But it's there, I talked about that. And the statute also says that if you're decertified by the commission, an individual can't go work for the Commonwealth in some other capacity. So you can't try to get a different police-ish job and if you've been decertified by the commission. So a good loophole closed there. And this is the difference between being not certified and decertified. Those are different things. And when you're reading news stories about police officers and post certifications, look out for this, because people use the terms interchangeably. They are not interchangeable. So not certified means that you are not certified. It's the absence of a certification. Being decertified means that you had one and it got revoked by the commission. That's different. You could be not certified because you retired and didn't apply for recertification. So it's not a disciplinary thing. So when you're reading stories about the commission or about our work, people get that wrong all the time in the news. Just understand what you're reading. So decertified is the one where we revoke your certification and you can't have it back. All right, next slide. All right, I'll turn it back over to Enrique.
Yeah, thank you. Gauging time a little bit, I'm prepared to talk a little bit more about certification, but I'm interested in time checking, and you want to get the questions?
6:55. So and 7:30, and people have questions, maybe
Okay.
5-10 minutes.
Okay, so just a couple of slides on certification. Can everybody hear me? Okay? No? Okay. What was the other one?
Can
I-
we get-
I don't project as much as,
Is it on?
can people hear me now?
Can people hear us? Can people hear?
Anything?
I think the speaker might have died.
Oh, is that the noise that it made when it made it?
Yeah.
That needed charge.
Okay, we'll
I
speak
can try to
loud.
speak louder, if that's okay. You know, I remember my high school drama teacher said, project. Okay, so post-certification is required for every officer to be able to conduct police duties and functions. There are a number of people that work for police departments that are not certified. They cannot be conducting police duties and functions. They generally mean what we all understand, you know, being able to conduct no-knock warrants, arrest people, use force, including deadly force, you know, represent themselves in a uniform, etc. The point is that post-certification is required for all of those people. There are a number of people without a post-certification that do work for police departments. The passage of police reform on July 1, 2021, everybody that was active at that time was grandfathered in the statute as certified, and then those certifications expired at different times, which gave the post-commission time to review all those people according to their last name. So there were people, officers with last names A through H were certified the next year, I through P the following year, and last year everybody Q through C. So we have gone through one whole round of certification, certifying everybody, meaning that we now have a good sense of what's the universe of officers that we are dealing with, and all of that is posted in our website. And in order to be able to conduct police duties and functions, they need to appear in those websites. They have to be renewed every 3 years. Next slide. And I mentioned this quickly. This is just what I mentioned. So let's just skip over to the next slide. We can anticipate, by the way, that we're rethinking the way that we conducted the first certification process. We want to enhance that process according to some of the other directives in the statute, and we're working on that, on what that new certification process would look like. It actually builds on the prior process. Just a couple of numbers here for to get an order of magnitude. There's 27 as of when we prepared this presentation a couple of days ago. There were 20,000, just north of 20,000 officers that were certified. There's a few, 340, that are conditionally certified. They just need to have a few other things to meet their certification, like what Matt was talking about, training, etc. There's a number of SROs, a few of them who are also conditionally certified. And there's that number that Matt referenced, people that are perhaps not certified, or not certified because they are on leave. They may be in an injury leave, etc. They were not certified, but once, in order for them to come back, they need to go through the process, get certified, and then we would move them in that category. We have 40 officers so far that we have decertified. All of that information, including the decisions, are in our website. If you want to check them out, those are the people that are gone for good. And at any given point, or rather, most recently, there's 11 people with that have been administratively suspended. As soon as they meet their requirement, which are all around training, they can be out of that suspension. Perhaps something to consider here. I'll add another data that's not in this slide. The Division of Standards has about 100 cases currently in their pipeline, which is keeping us very busy. But in context to the total number of officers, it's a very small number, which is something that I'd like to highlight, that which is one of the early points that I made. you know, the few that give everybody else a bad name is the ones that we're really focused on. Next slide. There's a couple, I'll breeze through these. If somebody is not, there's some exceptions to certification, conditional certification. The in-service training has to be every police officer has to go through 40 hours, about 40 hours of in-service training every year. They have to comply by that, with that requirement by June 30th. By September 30th, we really begin to condition their certification because, you know, all of that is a requirement of the statute. Next slide. There are instances where we decline to issue a certification, and then, you know, the officer leaves, let's say, or retires or whatnot. That's something that's happened as well. May not be, as Matt mentioned, this final decertification, but an officer maybe decided not to go through the new process. Actually, when police reform passed, there were a number of part-time officers who had never gone to full academy training. They were given an opportunity to go to something called the Bridge Academy and then get additional hours, get certified with additional hours of work. Many people that decided not to do that became categorized as not certified. Maybe one more slide. When there's declining to grant the full certification, there's a process, an internal process that goes through myself. It's called Executive Director Review. It's almost like a hearing of but it's not public. There's an opportunity for a hearing depending on whether the decision against them is adverse and they want to continue to be reviewed by the commission. What's the next slide, Matt? Oh, the commission is the one that actually has the final say in all matters, so they can vacate a decision, they can hear an officer reapply, etc. So let me pause there, and I know there's a number of questions about any of these. If I didn't get to it, you know, I can look at looking ahead after the questions if there are.
So the way we're gonna, I think there was a gentleman with a question earlier, so I'll let him go first. But play like we're on Zoom and raise your hand. Please don't just, so, did you have a question, you wanna ask your question, or you just want to say something?
I asked a question earlier.
Right.
About the sheriffs coming to your house with AR-15s, loaded AR-15s, and threaten you with them wearing police armor to people that are getting evicted out of the house. Even 80-year-old woman I know that got evicted out of a house. There were 6 police with AR-15s there. What 80-year-old woman is gonna threaten anybody? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is beyond thing. And I have another question. Is the sheriff responsible to make sure they take everything out of your house? Or is it grab what you want?
Let me speak to the first question, if I may. The scenario that you're describing sounds like it could be categorized as excessive force, which is something that, as I mentioned earlier, you can complain to us or the agency. And if you do the agency, let me just finish. If the agency is required to submit it to us within 2 business days, there's no exceptions for allegations of excessive force. We would then, you know, review it just like we explained. We look at the facts and circumstances. We ensure and defer initially to the investigation by the agency, and if we're not satisfied, we may take further action. Yes, ma'am. Grace.
Yes, very sure. So we had a lot of people who came who wanted to tell you stories, and I don't know where that fits in
we won't have time for stories, but questions. Let's do questions first, and maybe we can find any.
Our questions all have to do with why there's no enforcement,
So what's,
Well,
ask the
so
question.
I have here, and this is a tiny example, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 different people who presented themselves as constables.
Yeah.
And on their letters in an eviction say, I will serve and or levy upon such execution and physically remove the defendants. As you know, and I know, not one of them has a post-commission certification. They
Yep.
are threatening people in writing that they're going to touch them and remove them against their will, which is only something a police officer, someone with police powers can do. You know, they're explicitly deauthorized with police powers. We give this to the police who show up when they're called to deal with this, and their position is, and literally, to give you a file on this, and I don't know if I should name names, but literally, chief of police, you know, told us last Thursday that they will not enforce anything against these people.
The
And
chief of the police, against those constables?
yes, they will enforce no criminal law against these people, and yet we are giving them this. And I have 17 no trespass letters that were given by occupants, served through legal service, on these people claiming to be constables, and then we give copies of those letters to the police officers who show up. And in those letters, we explicitly first identified that they were didn't have their post-commission training, and now we quote the regulation that says they're literally deauthorized from having police powers, and the police not only allow it to go forward, but as one of our state representatives said, oh, that's a creative workaround, the police then come in behind them and do the police piece, the police powers piece for them. So now not only are they allowing it to go on, they are literally aiding and abetting, which of course defeats the entire purpose of having a requirement for training at all. Because the person who's legally authorized to evict just says, oh, I don't have the training. So the police are now gonna step in instead of doing what they're supposed to do. And, you know, you talked about sending up reports. We purposefully did a whole bunch of reports in the first week of January of last year to the Worcester Police Department, and to our knowledge, none of them were ever sent up to you, let alone in 2 days.
Yeah.
So we are in a free fall here, and it's terrifying, and the people who wanted to say something, I think, wanted to tell you about the impact on them of dealing with this and how terrifying.
Let me mention a couple of things. By the way, let me mention, these are very bad situations. No, you know, I would rather they not happen, right? Constables, we had an effort to issue regulations around constables. There's a number of issues that I can get into if you want me to, but I'll cut to the chase. Those regulations are not in place. We promulgated a draft. We got a lot of questions, a lot of comments from all constables saying that they were not workable, and the end result is that they are not certified. We don't have a regulations to certify them. They are not certified. So as far as we're concerned, they cannot be exercising police duties and functions or executing an arrest for any reason. That's the definition of the constable. A constable executing an arrest for any reason, that's all the statute says, would come under post. And because they haven't, they cannot execute an arrest for any reason. If they're doing that, they would be violating, you know, something, and they would be facing liability, in my opinion. Now, we have no jurisdiction over those people because they have not come in. But if they're, you know, roughing people up and using force, that's a problem.
Okay, but if you say it's a problem, you're saying they don't come under you, so it is in fact free for all, they can do whatever they want, but the judge can't prosecute them, the police won't do anything, and our folks are in danger? Is that basically where we sit legally at this point? Because we've made the complaints to the police departments, the chiefs of police are responsible for licensing these folks to have police powers, if they're gonna have them. And so you're
They,
saying
they
the
should
chiefs
not, they
are
should,
not
they,
responsible
they're
for
not,
the
they don't
violation?
have the police powers.
We know they don't, but they're acting like they do, and the police who are responsible both for not letting somebody do prohibited use of force, I think this would be prohibited use of force,
Yeah.
and are responsible for licensing these folks, are saying they will not enforce the code.
Question?
I do want to unfortunately tag onto
Tag along?
The short version is there have been multiple different times when police officers have the chief of police has told the Worcester City Council that quote unquote his hands are tied on this matter. Ironically, because the Worcester Police Department provided handcuffs for the constable to use and then filed the reports themselves to avoid this issue. In a situation where the eviction didn't end up going through anyways because there was a stay in court, and this is all documented through the police camera. Multiple, I guess so. This is a serious issue that the Worcester Police Department is the chief of police is not taking reports on these constables, and then then has told Grace Ross that he will not investigate. Sorry, that he doesn't see a problem renewing the license for a constable, that because there are no complaints, and the city manager who is responsible for appointing these constables has said his signature does not matter. That it is just a procedural thing that he has to sign off on this. He has left the vetting process of constables 100% to the chief of police, who just demonstrated to us that our process is effectively, if this guy has a clean record, which is of course based on whether or not the police will file a report in the first place. So it's a pretty cyclical issue that the police are entirely cooperative in. But more importantly, the police didn't just provide the handcuffs; they were present and actively criticizing the way these people were moving people off of their steps in an unlawful eviction without doing anything about it. So, if I had to ask a question, I might have misunderstood the 2 days. That's not on the public's end. That's on. Is there a time frame we have to say, hey, I am aware of excessive force? How long until I can report it to people?
There's
Anytime.
anytime. There's no statute of limitations on any complaints. If something happened, whenever you can submit a complaint, we will look at it.
You're going to get a load of them.
Yep.
Can I just add to?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, before we move on to the questions, 1 minute, sir. The 2 business day thing was for the agencies. Like when the agency gets a complaint, they need to tell us about it within 2 days.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That I didn't understand that.
Just
Yeah.
one clarification, that report, that arrest is being prosecuted by the constables, not under the police.
Oh.
And the police are providing the evidence for that prosecution. So it's quite clear they knew the arrest was done by the constables. They are supporting the constables in prosecuting that arrest, and everybody's in the know here. So this is an intentional violation, well known by the people doing it.
And if
I
I
know-
might, in my particular case, the judge in the court specifically gave the constable police powers.
Oh yes, that was a whole other.
So
I beg to differ.
Well,
That's not how
I
it
can
works.
show you the court record if you'd like, but I mean, and in my particular case, not only did they not pay the bond to be a constable in my town, so they weren't constables no matter what anyway, even though they claimed to be, and which is a felony to my understanding. But they also, one of the people under their control, quote unquote, committed sexual assault. And it's on videotape from 2 sources. And I did make the complaint to the police chief in my town. I don't know if they reported it to you within 2 days or at all.
I doubt that they did, but probably thinking that they're not the people that that we certify. But if the problem is if they're exercising police duties and functions and executing arrests, they need to be certified if they.
I mean, in my particular case, they came the first time to try and evict me, and the police were good because we showed that they did not have the authority to do it, and the police chased them off. Thank you for that. The second time, the judge wrote specifically on the papers that they had the right to do this, which is giving them police authority, according to your definition. And then they came in and they violated the law again because the Worcester Housing Court has the annoying opinion that they don't have to follow the law.
Due process.
Right.
This
And
is
the
larger
police- and
than-
the- and the
this is a
police
larger
people-
issue.
Yeah, I'm sorry to throw that on your
No,
shoulders.
you know, you understand, you know.
To their credit, they-
So,
Yeah.
hold on, time out,
Yeah.
time
Hold
out,
on,
time
hold on.
out. This is, I can't take anymore. Listen, let's have respect for everybody in the room, right? When you talk once, please let someone else talk. If you've already said something, move on. We're all here, right? We're all here for education. We all have something on our mind. Have some respect for everyone else. She can go next. I saw Roberto earlier and I had my hand up
We
for like
finished
5
that
minutes.
conversation though, like we're
Yeah.
halfway through it, I don't wanna stop it. So, what's
Well,
the
it's, let me just acknowledge the dilemma.
Yeah, sounds
They,
like
if they are not under post
I'm
jurisdiction.
trying to correct a important factual correction, that's all. But I'll leave.
No, I didn't ask you to leave,
No,
Chris.
I'm done.
I didn't
I'm done
ask you
with
to
this.
leave.
Everybody's got a criticism. We're trying to
It's not a
save people's
criticism.
lives, and it would be
It's-
nice, just stop being
But we're all here for
criticized
different
it.
issues. We're all here for different issues related to this,
Some
Chris.
people need to say more. What's this business about you dictating how
I
people are
think-
supposed to talk?
Agreed.
Okay.
I think
Okay,
my question
Pat.
might actually help.
Okay,
I'm
please,
gonna
please
ask
go ahead.
my question, and it's related, because there are systemic problems, definitely in the system, on lots of levels. I have firsthand experience, I'm not speaking for everyone, but there are systemic problems. My personal issue, which I'll keep out of it, had to do with my father being killed. So there's some other issues besides housing. That doesn't make my issue more important. But I've never heard of this organization until I got the email, thank you very much, and got invited to this forum. I would like to know about, and I'll just throw out a couple of levels, where the agencies intersect, where for consumers, where we can know, where we can get support and voice complaints, particularly about inappropriate police misconduct. Is it possible to make complaints against an entire department? I'm not talking about the entire agency, but a department that was complicit in covering up problems and causing part of problems.
Yes.
And you had a dead body in a freezer, so, I mean, there's some
Yeah.
really gross stuff. But also, in terms of the systemic nature, sorry, I'm riled up, and I think racial profiling was involved and whatever, so anyway, but that's another issue. But where is the intersection between, how consumers can get support and voice problems against the systemic problems, right? Not just the individual problems, but the systemic problems. Where, and I don't, not to put you on the spot, this has been very helpful, but where is your organization getting input from people that really are impassionate and have firsthand experience? And for me, aside from, for me personally, the city of Worcester is actually in some ways doing a better job than the small towns, than the state police, than other places where there are also systemic problems. So can you address that, please?
Yes, let me mention one thing. We receive complaints, from any source on any number of people. Yes, about departments or systemic issues. We design our system to be tied to officers, but they don't have to. You can submit information in any way. It's the intake form in our website is pretty straightforward. You can also just pick up the phone and talk to somebody. You don't get a live person, but you will get a person to call you back. There's when it's systemic issues or any issues really, there has to be a basis for investigation. We do get, unfortunately, a lot of complaints that where there's no basis. It's anonymous or there's little we can do. With that, so those aside, we need to have anybody, including the agencies, need to have a basis for investigation, and when they do, we will follow up.
I'm gonna insert for you, if you don't mind, lay people, the public,
Yep.
constituents, we don't always know how to identify and articulate correctly the exact infractions.
Yep.
But if there is an audience for some of the seemingly smaller complaints and the frustrated complaints and the
Yep.
ones that we don't know how to express, you may be able to determine the pattern. And I wanna know, is there an audience and an outlet for that?
Well, we start with meetings like this, that we will go where they will have us. Even if it's about something that we cannot talk about. We are doing this. We don't mind. We love hearing from you. Let me mention something else. and I'll turn it over if you wanted to chime in as well. We are not a law enforcement agency in the sense of criminal proceedings. But we do refer matters to the Attorney General and the District Attorney. When we suspect that there has been something that rises to the level of criminality, we will refer them to them and follow up, and that's, again, another mechanism. This is to your question about how we, how there's different agencies doing different things. We do collaborate in those instances. The matter of the constables is something that might need a legislative fix. I know that's not what you want to hear, because it doesn't seem like it will happen very quickly, but we've had conversations around what the law did relative to constables that was difficult to implement, for the reason that many of them don't operate as if they were within an agency. So in order for us to bring constables under the fold, we proposed that their agency that they were associated with had the obligation to submit all the disciplinary information, just like I explained, and that created all kinds of issues, and that's why, that and many other reasons, is why they're not currently certified, and that leaves them, in my view, at least for now, liable to being sued, and on all those arrests. If they did an arrest that was not, within post, they should throw that out. Yes.
But I appreciate that, but at the same time, I recognize it's within the definition of post, and it's been 5 years to certify constables. So I guess I would like to stay focused on you and ask you to move this along. And so the best that I can come up at this point would be, would you be willing to come back here at a different night, both of you, if the Y was willing to host, and take notes and testimony from folks that have personal experiences of constables behaving as police officers, and you can choose after that to issue a report saying, because of reasons X, Y, and Z, we can't. But at this point, the police are refusing to in Worcester. The city council and the city manager have heard this multiple times at open session and have voted and said, we have no jurisdiction. The housing court has said that. So I guess we're pleading with you, and you've heard Grace.
Understood.
Would you come back and take testimony from folks, record it officially, and then choose whatever you do with it publicly, of taking action or saying we can't for these reasons?
We'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
I think Bill had his hand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think a point of information, and you can confirm whether I'm speaking correctly or not. I'm a retired police officer. And in these situations that we're talking about, and I'm going to put the constables to the side for a second. Constables are allowed to serve civil process only. Police officers are only allowed to serve criminal process. Therefore, when a police officer arrives at a scene like that, they are there to provide safety and security for all parties involved, constables and the citizens. They are not. They are often acting as an extension of the power of the constable, or they allow them to do the things that we've said they're not allowed to do, and you've said they're not allowed to do, and they don't do anything about it. So I think that's an important point.
That's good. Well said.
So following up on that, the question that it raises for me is, considering that one of the things that you said that the police officers have is a duty to report. If a police officer is observing behavior that is illegal, but it's not another police officer doing it, and they facilitate it rather than report it, is that something that is a infraction by that police officer?
Yeah.
That is subject to the post control?
I know this is not answering your question, but let me mention this right now. We are in the process, and I want to execute this soon, of surveying just who are we talking about? How many constables are out there? I've had a number of conversations early on with the two representatives of the constables when we were formulating those regulations that never got promulgated, and they would talk about all these hundreds and thousands of people which I kind of find hard to believe. But what's more important for us as a next step, in addition to taking testimony, like I just said we would, is to know just who are we talking about, and who, and our intention is to go to police departments and say, all right, who under you, who is a constable operating under your purview? Because that's getting uncomfortably close to police duties and functions, right? That seems to be, you know, creating a loophole. It's like, oh, it's not us, it's the constable, but we license them, or we give them some authority. Just service, not arrest. So I want to know just how many throughout the state are there, and we're going to take that step very soon.
But you didn't answer the question that I
Yes,
asked.
please remind me.
So the question that I asked was, if the police officer is facilitating conduct
Yeah.
that is illegal conduct, is the police officer was committing a sanctionable infraction by doing that? Given that one of the things that you said was the duty of police officers was that there was a duty to report.
Yeah. Potentially. I mean, I know you're doing a hypothetical, but potentially.
Well, it's not hypothetical.
Okay.
We've heard reports of this actually happening. So somebody could report that failure to report, is that right?
Sure.
As a complaint against that police officer, is that correct?
Sounds like the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'm a Scott here.
Yeah.
Isn't it mandatory to report? Good job. Like a police officer?
For like 20 minutes, half an hour. But I'll wait. Someone else want to go, I can wait if you want to take another one. I think Jenny had her hands up.
Yes, hello there. I have a question more related to the systemic problems that many of us are witness to and observe. From the post-commission standpoint, when you shared with us some information around recommendations, this is, I'm assuming, on the assumption that the local law enforcement is reporting to you
Yes.
within the 2 days,
Yeah.
which we know often is not happening.
Yeah.
If it does, on that assumption, when you talk about things like training, who quantifies that? Who tests that? How are we enforcing law enforcement's ability to be able to conduct the work that, you know, they're there to conduct, which is to serve and protect, right? And to hold criminals accountable. So for me, it's more about, is this whole system in a way fallible? Sounds fallible to me on so many levels, because the stereotype boys in blue, when you have a closed institution that rally and circle the wagons to protect their own, it feels like what I'm hearing is that you're relying on the fairness and truthfulness of law enforcement to report on themselves. And if very few law enforcement agencies will report on themselves, how do we hold them accountable for these infractions? So to me, it's a bigger question, and I don't know whether or not you have an answer for that, because as the public, we can come to you and say, all right, collectively, we've got, you know, dozens or hundreds of reports of this. And then your job is then to, how do you determine credible evidence? How do you determine, right, whether it's a reasonable infraction when you've got the law enforcement agency, oh, that's not what happened?
Let me speak to two things that get to that question. I didn't get to that. It's actually in the next slide, looking ahead. We just promulgated regulations on auditing and maintenance of records. And I mentioned this very briefly, but I'll expound. Our intention is to soon, this year, we ask for money, more money to the legislature, to begin an audit program. And the first audit program that we're going to have is, did you comply with the regulations that we just published on submitting reports to post timely, you know, with the exceptions for minor matters, but were you too creative for minor matters, etc. So that's a process that we plan to begin. You know, it's not going to be tomorrow, but you know, we're planning on something this year. There's a second part which we're also working on, and we've been setting a number of discussions with the commissioners around agency certification. Post also has a role certifying agencies. That's about as much as the statute says. So we have actually on 8 standards. And we feel it should be many more standards. For example, other states have like hundreds. But what we have is the intention, and we've started to take steps around certifying agencies for the very reason that you articulate, the larger issue, the systemic problems. I can tell you now, we've been doing, just on the complaints, we've been doing a number of analytics, and I want to do more of this. Okay, how many big agencies submitted how many complaints? And if you're a big agency and you've submitted very few, guess who's going to be the first one to be audited? Okay, we're just going to sort them in different ways, large agency and few complaints, and we're going to corroborate whether anybody in your agency understands what we just outlined here, the regulations, or anything else. So those are 2 things that are coming. We don't have that yet, but we've been working on it. Yes, sir.
So after the audit, and I know it's looking ahead, what is the accountability if they're found to have not been reporting to you?
Well, the first thing that we have, and I think it's a powerful one, is to issue a report publicly and let everybody just have it. Say, here, look at your department, town council or mayor, see what they've been doing. You wanna add?
When you're done.
Yeah. When it came to the topic of certifying agencies, the quick question came up from some of the conversations with chiefs. It's like, what happens if you don't certify an agency all of a sudden? Right? Imagine that you don't. That scenario is out there, but bear with me. I will make an argument that the whole agency cannot conduct police duties and functions. That you can direct traffic, but if you're not certified, no arrests, no warrants, etc. If we ever get to that point, my guess is that we'll be in court. That we would never want to be in that position is my hope. But you can take that logic to the same that we have with law enforcement officers, police duties and functions, arrests, etc. applies by virtue of certification of agencies to agencies as well.
I was going to add that your question and your question are the 2 questions that keep me up at night. Those 2 things I think are such an important part of the way forward on this. We've got to get to a place where it took us 3 years to get through certifying 22,000 officers. That's a big, huge task. So just to get to that point was a lot of work just to get there. The next phase is about the agencies. It's about holding the agencies accountable as an agency. So you can discipline an officer for excessive force, for bias, for individual instances, or even patterns of behavior over a period of time. But what do you do, like you've said, with an agency that's systemically not complying with what the statute expects, what the public expects, and the agency certification is the hook. That is the next phase of our work, and then the audit phase, where we will have to develop this capability as we continue to grow. We're still definitely in startup mode. We always talk about this at the group. We're in startup mode still. But to build the capacity to actually go to an agency and say, show me all the civilian complaints that you have in your records, and then do a side-by-side with our system and identify the % compliant that you are or are not. And if that number falls below a certain number, then you are, non-compliant, right? That is the next phase of progress for the commission.
Let me mention something else, and I'll get to that gentleman in a minute.
We have him over here.
Okay.
And we're gonna, it's 7:33, and I love all of this energy. We will bring them back here, if that's what the community wants, for sure. I know Enrique and Matt will come back. So can we take, there was Fred, and then we'll take, you had one,
I'm so
three
quick.
more.
I
So
waited a half hour for something. Watch how quick you answered us. No, I didn't. My intent was not to disrespect anyone in the room. My intent was to cause some order in the room, right? I see that, it seemed like one conversation. The best idea I heard was just now. This seems like a single conversation that needs to have its own meeting, not You know, that was my only take. My question is, could the governor, if a new governor comes in, could they disband posts, right? This is a really good thing, all right, so that's good, that's one question. And then I wanna thank you, this was a lot of helpful information. Some folks got some information that they, you know, wasn't really what they wanted to hear, but we all got some information. The next thing I wanted to ask you is, from Worcester, right? There's some challenges, there's some things that are happening. What can we do in Worcester to help you, commissioners, to do your job? If it's call legislators or whatever we can do, is there anything that we can do to help you do your work?
Let me react to the to your hypothetical of, you know, how could somebody in the future or in the present undermine the post commission? The thing that I think is more likely to happen is that we don't have enough resources in terms of funding, like we want to. So for what I just described, you know, an audit program, additional auditors, agency certification, we need more people. And if the legislature doesn't give us those funds, we need to make some hard choices. So that's the reality. Rather than, I doubt anybody's going to strike the statute, but it's through the funding. You know, and I'll get to you in a minute. To the other part of your question, you know, we have a public complaint. You can submit to us. We have conversations. We can come back and have that, you know, continue that level of engagement. Everything that we do comes from any source. We can get complaints from any source, investigate for any reason. So we want to hear who are the worst actors and the bad actors and the systemic issues. Yes, ma'am.
Police officers have the right to refuse a police report.
Police report?
I myself, it happened to, and several members of who I help. We go to do a police report and they refuse to take them.
They don't have that.
They give us an attitude and they refuse to take them. In my personal life, I was an abused wife that I escaped that. And I was attacked in a restaurant. I went down to the police station and they refused to take my police report. And he said awful things to me. And refused it. 2 weeks later, I almost got murdered by my ex-husband.
I'm sorry about that.
It's bad, and then people that get evicted illegally, getting abused, and they're refusing their police reports. It's really scary, but I don't feel like we're protected.
Well, the public can submit complaints directly to us, and as I mentioned earlier, we corroborate whether if anybody has submitted a complaint to the agency is required to submit it to us within 2 business days. In our intake form, we ask if you've submitted a complaint to the agency already. So in your particular circumstance, you know, somebody can come in and submit a report saying, and I've submitted it, and if we don't see it, that's the first red flag.
When you call 911, if you're afraid of something happening to you, you want protection, they're like, well, do you have any physical harm, or does your property have any physically harm? I'm like, no, but do you want it to? So is that what it has to take to fill out a form? It's crazy.
We had 2 more questions. I think we got a gentleman here and then one there. And then you can probably, if you have other questions, I don't know if Enrique and Matt, what their time looks like, that you can ask after we kind of, good. So.
Yeah, mine would just be one, like a little, sitting here hearing everything, maybe just a suggestion, and then maybe a couple of 2 questions. But going with the question, I heard you talking about certification, right? Is it that Post is doing it or in collaboration with the police? With the training department of the police that is doing those certification. But the reason why I'm looking at that is that Worcester, when it comes to training, in my opinion, they have the best of training. But from my little experience and encounter with the police, I don't think the training is the issue. It has to do with something that we all here cannot, change within 1 or 2 years. That is their own values, their own belief system that they bring within that police training. Because what I have seen is sometimes some of the things, some of the interaction we have is just about ego. Somebody who is used to being right all the time, and now they have this power, so they want to bring that in, everything they do must be right. So at the end, damage people's reputation, their records and things like that. So what I'm looking at is not that police from everywhere in Worcester, in my opinion, they have the best of training. They know how to use the gun, when and how to use it. But when that trickle, or that experience that they have. So I think we're talking about, I would want for us to really, really focus on maybe one of my recommendations to you, maybe to the police chief, if they can have maybe annually on that cultural, on their personal, if their psychological training is going for a month, let everybody go for it. They come back to debrief themselves, and then they come back to the force. Because that problem, most of the problem that we have is all about personal, that experience that they have from the childhood or from what they're bringing into the police. It's not that the academy is bad. Don't teach them nothing bad, but when that experience gets in, that's one. The second thing that I see with post, and which of course have to go with together, I see a lot of emphasis on complaint, like I want to see what we are doing wrong. What if we have 1,000 police officers and there's 100 personnel who is bad, who's having all the bad record? What happened to the 900? Should we not maybe annually give the people certification or maybe some award for being good? That could be something for which we make this 100 to change from being negative to positive. So that could be something that you can bring there that would, motivate them with, if that's donut or coffee or something, or vacation, something that could entice them to be doing something great. All the time that could motivate them to go on. They are all human beings like us. I've had some worst experience with one person, but they are all as us. We all have our own personal, thing that make us, when I see this person, we bring something even that will change my interaction with him. And that's what most of them are faced with. So until we can find a remedy around that, I think we'll have a better community and a better city. Some of those things is just about the personal upbringing. That's the problem. And we're post, you guys are doing great, but I think, in my opinion,
what's the question?
Starting at a place where you have more problem than the solution. Your capacity is too small, and the problem is too great. So I see you.
We're growing. Let me react to your larger point in this context. This is a small part of your larger point. We are, there was a lot of emphasis, you're correct, on disciplinary records. We had to get all the records and review them and then publish them. And again, as Matt mentioned, this is a work in progress and there's new records that come in every month. Our intention is to also start collecting letters of commendation, which is what our regulations speak to, and make those available as well. To your point about maybe also, showcasing and maybe having people look at that and get a page from that. So that's something that is in the works for this year.
And our last question, but I think we're over here in the, it was, one more question, I don't care who takes it.
One over here.
Okay, no, for you had a question.
Is that quick? Something quick? Yeah, mine was, so this is, I guess, a bit unrelated from some of the previous questions about the constables. But I was aware that last week there was a settlement that the Post Commission reached with, I guess, the police union involving asking officers questions about off-duty conduct. So I think it was specifically social media posts that officers made and their relationships with, organizations that could be considered hate groups. And my understanding is the settlement that the police union had with you is that you can't ask that anymore. Does that, would that negate any type of investigation? Because I know for a fact, I have personal records of organizations in Massachusetts that are very clearly, would be considered hate groups, that the FBI considers domestic terrorist threats, that there are active duty members of law enforcement involved in these organizations.
Yeah, the answer to your question is absolutely not. Okay. It doesn't negate any of that. Let me speak to that settlement. We were sued by two unions early on with bogus claims that we violated the open meeting law. We've maintained that we didn't. They went to court and and amended their complaint because they wanted the questionnaire that we prepared for certification, which is one of the components for certification. They wanted 4 questions out of the 8 that we formulated, completely gone. The judge affirmed 2 questions. She left 2, and she said the 2 questions that you're asking around social media and associations are too broad. They're permissible, but they're too broad. What we just settled was, to get rid of that. By the way, she enjoined us on those questions. We could not ask them. So we had to go with certifying, 8,000 officers at the time, and so we just eliminated those 2 questions. Now, fast forward to just recently, what the agreement says, we cannot ask those 2 questions in the form that they were asked, which is exactly what the judge enjoined. We can ask them for sure, and by the way, in their claim, they said that we had no authority to even ask those questions. That's completely wrong. We maintain that was never the case, and we do have the authority to ask that question and many others around those 2 areas. It was just too broad in the judge's mind, and we had to follow her.
A second part really quick, I was gonna ask you, so I know you would talk to getting complaints directly from police departments and law enforcement entities. Does this include district attorney's offices? Because I know they maintain Brady lists of officers that they found repeatedly lie under oath, that, it seems like if they're committing perjury, that's something that the post commission should investigate. And is that something that is sent to you guys as well, or is that just personal?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
All right.
Wonderful, so that's gonna be the end of question. Get yours, they can answer
One
that.
last.
You wanna take one last
One
question?
last one, yeah, he's been asking.
Follow up on what he said. To have better policing, it'd be better to have less escalate and more mitigate. They're way too quick to escalate. And you mentioned about that the legislature has to do something about the constables. The law is already in place with the police powers. They have to come under the police chief, otherwise they don't have police powers. They can only do search process under a certain limit of monetary. And I'll pass the rest of my time to Grace.
So we're gonna end there. Grace, what you didn't hear is that we are gonna have them come back and take stories, testimonies, okay.
Because it's escalating so fast.
I know. They may be able to stay a few minutes after, but I do want to respect people's time, and thank you all for coming out. Thank the NAACP. Thank my fellow commissioners.